All right, guys. Good evening, everyone. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear me clearly, okay? If you're watching from YouTube or Twitch, let me know in the chat if you can hear me clearly. Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, so sorry for the delay. We're actually trying to resolve a couple of things here. Nice. All right, so we're basically going to be covering HTML forms today. I'm sure you are aware. Also, I believe you all have seen the materials that were shared, I think, on the group, including Discord, right? I think it was also shared on Discord, or it was primarily shared on Discord, and you were asked to check it out. So make sure you have actually, gone through that material, or at least, checked out the link so that you can go back to that material after the class, okay? We're going to continually upload new content, on that particular guide, and I'll get to talk about that after the class. Okay, so let me share my screen. Just give me a second. Let me do that real quick. Let me share my screen. Let's see. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen, guys. I think I have to make this a bit bolder. Let's see if I can. Awesome. Nice. Okay. You can also drop updates for your friends that are yet to join. So yeah, I'm currently sharing my screen. I have the basic boilerplate. Of course, you all already have experience with some of these basic stuffs. You know how to create this page, right? This code snippets. Okay. So if you don't know how to do this, you can just put in the yeah, use the exclamation sign, and you have this emit abbreviation. When you click on that, you have this simple boilerplate, including the head tag and some of these fundamental tags, right? The meta tags, and of course your title. Okay, so we're going to be focusing. Yeah, so I just had to bring the other one back. Let me take this off for now. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on forms, right? Okay, someone said I should zoom in. Let's zoom in. I hope this is better. Yeah, I hope this is better. Okay, so if you're having network issues, maybe you can try Twitch. If it's same thing, maybe you can also try to check the quality that YouTube provided by default based on your network. Then you can try to scale that up. Okay, select a different quality if that might help. If you're not seeing my screen very well, we're going to be working right here in the body tag, right? So basically, the body tag, of course, the content of your website comes into the body tag. I'm sure you are aware of that by now. All right. So when working with HTML forms, I'm very sure you might have done some research, but if you haven't done any research on what HTML forms are all about, I'm sure you've seen those simple interface where you have to fill in your details, right? Some of you used Google Forms, for example, right? You saw the areas that you had to put in some of those details. I would love to show an example of what I am describing. Let me see if I can do that. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, well, hopefully we can. Let's see if I can. Hmm. Okay, that is going to be a bit problematic from what I can see. Okay. Okay, just Give me a minute. I'm having some issues with the screen resolution. Okay. Um, okay. Let's just continue. So I'm sure you have seen, some of those forms, right? Maybe you have seen some of those, forms, like on Google Form, for example, where you have to put in, you have to put in your name into some sort of boxes like this, right? Just to verify that you can see my screen while I'm showing this sketch. Okay, yes, you can. All right. So I'm sure you have seen, those kind of forms where you have to put in your name, you have to put in maybe some additional details. Then, of course, you have to, um, yeah, of course, you have to simply enter, like click on a button, right? So you've seen maybe submit button after entering some of those information. Yes, that is an example of an HTML form. Okay. And we're going to be creating some of those forms today. Okay. So we should be able to accept, regular input fields, like your name, your phone number. We should be able to use items like, radio buttons, check boxes, right? And of course, we're going to experiment with most of them. So the first thing you want to put in here would be the form tag. Okay, so you have the form tag just like this. Right. Okay, so by putting this in here, you see I don't actually have anything showing up because I don't have any component yet or any element, any form element. Okay, there are some additional attributes, that you can add, and we're going to cover them, shortly. But just to show you an example, we can actually have inputs. Okay, so I can simply say type and I can say text. All right, and I can say placeholder. I'm going to explain this shortly. I can say enter your name. Okay, just an example. All right, so if you look at this side, you see we have enter your name. So this is basically an input field accepting text. So this is how you actually use the element, right? Or the tag. You have the input tag and it has to be within the form, right? It makes sense that you put this within the form. Sometimes you might actually use some tags without, using them the appropriate way, and it seems to work fine for you. But it's better to always follow the standards or follow the right practice. Okay, so to avoid having some errors along the line. Okay, so we have the input field and we have the type of text, and then we have placeholder, enter your name. The value you see in here, right? If you start typing, that goes off. That is a placeholder. Okay, so the placeholder is only going to tell the user of that website or the user of that web app that this is what I want you to do here. Okay, I want you to put in your name, or I want you to put in maybe something else, right? Enter your maybe area of specialization. That's too long. Okay, so I can just say enter your first name, maybe first name, right? And of course, I can have a duplicate of this where I can say enter your last name. Okay, so now you see we have two values right here. Okay, so we are going to come back. Let's take this off. So let's start over again. All right, so now we have the form. Okay, and the form element itself is the cornerstone of creating forms. In HTML, I mean everything starts from here. Okay, so we're going to put in the method. So the method is an attribute, of this element that describes the kind of action you want to perform, right? So for example, if you say post, which can be in small case of caps, but yeah, let's just go with caps. So if we say post, what we're saying here is, okay, we actually want to submit this, and we want to, when we click on the submit button, if it's a button or an input type, we simply want to, perform this kind of action, right? When I hover on this, you see we have a description. So we'll get to this section where we would actually talk about HTTP methods. I don't want to dive deep into this because it's going to, take us, to a different tone. Okay, so I don't want us to talk about this in detail. But yeah, so these are basically, HTTP methods. When it comes to sending requests, over the internet, we'll get to talk about this in the future. Now, this is one of the attributes, right? When working with forms, we also have targets, right? So if you're using target blank, for example, I remember we discussed this when we were talking about anchor links. Okay, so if you're using target blank, it's to say when I try to submit, I want you to take me to a different page, right? To perform this action. Okay, you can actually use target blank for that if that is a scenario that you want to have on your website. Okay, we can also use action. All right, so the action is going to describe, the particular. Let me put in submit form here. Submit form. Okay, just like this. All right, so this action is basically describing, a particular resource that you want to call, especially when you have, this front end code, connected to back end systems like PHP, for example. Okay, so if I'm saying submit form, I am simply trying to submit this form as a post method, right, to this specific resource that I already have, on my backend. Okay, so that is how this works basically. All right. Not to dive so deep into this. If you have questions, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. All right. But let's quickly talk about some of the input types again. We're going to discuss some of those input types again. The first one I mentioned earlier was inputs type. All right. And I basically use the option for text. Okay. Okay, so and I also use the placeholder. All right, so the type here basically describes, it's just saying, all right, what we expect to be in this field should be a regular text. All right, you can actually have a type to say I'm expecting an email. Okay, you can have a type to say I'm expecting an email. You can have a type to say I'm expecting a password, right? This is just going to describe the type of data that the input field is expecting, and of course, HTML is going to also assist you, to ensure that the items you've put in here also corresponds, at least based on the standards, to what to the type you've entered. So, for example, if I have a text, just right here, and I say enter your name, right? Okay, if I also go ahead to put, so let's say I put in a type of email next. Let's start off with a simple title. Okay, so let's just say we have a title of H2 registration form. Registration form. Okay. All right, so we have a placeholder saying enter your email. Just enter your email. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we have another input field. Probably this says type, maybe phone, right? So let's just say type of phone, or let's simply say password. Okay, placeholder. I'm going to say enter your password. All right. So we have three input fields. You see what it looks like here. All right. Yeah, I remember someone asking me one time, where can what can you use div for exactly? So if you want to have these items sit on different lines, of course, we're not using CSS yet. Ideally, that would be the best way to go about styling your forms. But since we're not using CSS yet, you can basically break this, by either using the BR tag, which is the break tag, of course, or you can simply put this in, like different divs, right? So it basically puts every item on its own line. Okay, if that is something you want to do, um, yeah, that's fine. So you basically have these items, broken into different lines, of course, with the help of the div, right? So this is your divider. Okay, so it's basically dividing the items into multiple lines here. And yes, you can also have your final, maybe the button. Okay, so you can have an input type. You can say submit, right? You can also use a button tag for this, but for the sake of forms, I would always recommend you go with input, right? I mean that does the job perfectly. So if I say input type submit, I can set the value, for example, to I can say click me, right? Or I can say register. That makes sense. Okay, so yeah. So let's see what can BR tag do for us here. It basically creates that space, right? If you want to have some space here, of course, you can use this. Okay, it creates that space. So what exactly have we done here? Okay, so we just added the title of this form. We added the form tag. We also added some form elements such as the input type of text, the input type of email, the input type of password, as well as the input type of submit. Okay, so if I submit this, you see it's basically going to refresh this page. We're not getting that action here because we're not doing this on a browser. But I'm going to move this to a browser, next, so that we can visualize what exactly is going on here. All right. So let me check if you have some questions before we proceed. Um, all right. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. So we don't have any questions just yet. Okay. Cool. Cool. Let's proceed real quick. Okay. So I'm going to close this for now. All right. Someone is saying, please, what does the value of input submit tag actually do? Oh, that's actually setting the value you're seeing there, like, the register. So I can change this to something else. It can be, um, I mean, if you don't have anything, you have a default of submit, okay? Right? But then you can change the value. We have register, we have sign up, we have login, all right? Okay, so yeah, let's just leave register. Okay, so I'm going to close this for now because we cannot, we cannot sort of test this form on this plugin that we're using here, right? So instead, we're going to open this up on our browser. So just give me a second. I'm going to quickly pull up a private tab right here. Okay, let's expand on this. Nice. All right. So I'm going to, bring out this web page. So let me see. I have this web page right here. Okay. So that makes sense. So now we have our code on one side, just to make sure you can see everything clearly. We have our code on one side, we have good. We have the page on this other side. All right. So, when I click on register, you see it basically refreshed the page, right? If I click on register, the page is actually being refreshed. But yeah, we want to add some extra. Someone is saying, is there a way we can have the boxes sit side by side just with HTML? By default, it sits side by side. It seems like you're just joining now. By default, if you don't use the div, it sits side by side. Please try to join the classes early so I don't have to repeat myself. Okay. So if I save and I refresh, you see you basically have it look this way, right? If you say you want to have two items on one side, yes, you can, of course, wrap it up with the div, just like this, right? And then you can, of course, put in the other items, or you can just break it. Okay, you can just decide to break it. But you see what I did here? All right. You can just decide to say, okay, let's break it with just HTML for now. Okay, so we can just come right here and use the BR tag, save. Of course, you see we have the same thing. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. um yeah, let me zoom in on this so you can see it very well as well. Yeah, good, good. Okay, so back to this page. Yeah, back to the code. We have the input types, right? We have the input types, or some of the input types. We're also going to put in a different option here. We call that the checkbox, right? So you can basically put in a checkbox to say, by the way, I think I would prefer to keep this with the divs, just to keep things separated. Okay. So I'm just using Control Z, okay, just to go back to what we've done before. All right. So we can have different items. We can have the items on different lines. Okay. So at this point, I can simply say I want to have an input type of checkbox. All right. And yeah, just to show you what this would look like, let's refresh. So you see we have the checkbox. Okay. All right. And yeah, you can also choose to add you can choose to add a value, right? You can choose to add a value to your checkbox, and you can simply say remember me, or maybe I agree with the terms. Let's just say with the T and C, okay, just to keep it short. Okay, so if I refresh, let's see, what do we have here? Did I make a mistake with the, let me see. Oh, right. I think I did. Okay. So basically, the value should not come in this way. The value is actually tied. This should be a regular text. Okay. The value should be maybe something like yes or no. Okay. And then you have, yeah, the value just pops up, on the side. Okay. So just like this. I agree with the T and C. That text is quite big, but yeah, that's fine. Okay. And All right, cool. So we have the name, enter your name, email. So if I enter a regular item here that is not an email, and I try to register, you see it tells us, please include an at the end of the email address, right? So this is not a valid email, which is why when I try to register, it actually comes up with this notification saying this is wrong. Okay, there's a mistake right there. And yeah, because we basically specified that this is the type we need. So HTML at this point is just, doing some, very simple, or I would say base level, validation. Okay. Here we have password. So of course, as you expect, when you type in something, by default, it is hidden. Okay. That is how passwords should, function. All right. And the reason for that is because we have added a type of password. If we don't add a type of password, then of course you expect that this should show up. Okay. Yeah. Let's do that again. Password, refresh. Yes, now we have yeah, we have the characters showing up because we have those characters hidden because we've selected the type of password. All right. So the first option was the text. There are some additional attributes we can also include. For example, trying to make the entry required. Okay. In order to make an entry required, you can simply add required just like this. Okay. So this shows that this item is required. If you try to maybe you enter these other items correctly, like mav at gmail, for example.com, with a random item here as the password. I agree. When you try to register, it says, please fill in this field just because you've specified that the name is required. All right. We're going to use the required option for probably all items. Now, that is the attribute, that specifies that a particular item is required. Let me check the chat to see if we have any questions before I proceed. Okay, someone is saying, what if it's in a P tag? Will it still work? If you are referring to the check, yeah, the text we used in place of that checkbox. Let me see. If you are referring to this, yes, if that's what you are referring to. Unfortunately, the only difference here is that this would then, let's see, let's see, this will probably appear on a new line. I save that and I run this, you see it appears on a new line. Okay, so yeah, that's what I was trying to mention here. If that's your question, if that's what you are referring to on this, I believe that's probably what you're referring to. Okay, someone is saying, how can I add the iSign to change the password to visible or invisible? We're going to touch on that when we get to working with CSS and JavaScript. Please don't try to rush. Okay, if you don't know how to do that, yes, you can actually Google your way around things. It's quite simple, but yes, you have to get there first. We're not rushing this. Okay. How can we make password visibility? Yes, you're going to get there. These things are not difficult, but if you have not gotten there yet, we can't just jump to that part. Okay, so please follow the process. If you have learned past this, you can simply Google your way around getting that response. Okay, so let's continue from here. We have the type of password. We've also applied the require attribute here. Okay, so let me go back again, and I will simply try to skip another field. So I'm going to enter Mav. I'm going to enter the email, Mav at gmail.com. I'm going to enter a password, or I'm going to skip the password. All right. Remember, I think we forgot to refresh this. Let's do that again. So Mav, let's say full name, Mav Magic. Email, Mav at gmail.com, and password. Let's try to leave that empty. So it says, please fill in this field. Okay. If you also leave this, field empty, yes, it's going to tell you to fill in the field, and of course, it's going to tell you you don't have a valid email address. Okay. So yeah, that is that is for that's what we have for now. Let's go ahead and add some additional attributes. So for example, we have the name attribute. This is actually important because if you're working with labels, it's a good idea to say, okay, we can use those labels to identify the specific input fields, right? That is one. Secondly, when you start interacting with JavaScript, right, um, you can actually add some sort of behavior, okay, using the name or the ID attributes, right? So if you hover on this basically adds some level of description. So let's see what we have here. Okay, so the input element represents a typed data field, usually with a form control to allow the user to edit data. Anyways, let's put in a name of, let's call this name, or let's call this full name, right? Enter. Oh, I think I'm in the wrong place. Sorry about that. Let's move this to the top here. Enter your full name. Okay. So we've added a name of full name, and yes, we can bring in a label. Yeah. So we can bring in a label, and on the label we can actually add the, we can say enter your full name. Then right here in the placeholder, we can just give an example. We can say EG magic. Okay. So let's save that. Come back here, refresh. All right, so now you see enter your full name and it gives an example in the placeholder. So yes, we can put a column right here, or we can also choose to break it, so where you have it at the bottom, but this is fine. Okay, maybe we can just make it short. So full name, something like this probably makes sense. Okay, so full name. All right, so yeah, I'm also checking the chat. Someone is saying, what software do you use for coding? This is Visual Studio Code. Please try to check the materials we've provided. We actually covered some of these things step by step, including, showing you how to download, Visual Studio Code. Just maybe you've not seen it, okay? So you can actually check the Discord material section, right? Right there, you would find this material, um, 300 dev days. Okay, so superdev.gitbook.io/300 dev days. So you can also find the curriculum right here, the workshops, some of the fundamentals that we've taken in the previous classes, but we'll down the videos to make things a lot concise, right? So do well to go through the live sessions, the live videos, but then you can also follow up with this material because we're going to be updating this regularly. And of course, right here, you can also get to see your calendar. You can join the Discord server or the WhatsApp group. Yeah. And if you check out some of the material, for example, the HTML element deep dive, of course, this is a continuous, I mean, you're going to get more materials even as we proceed to, like, JavaScript, Vue, React, and the rest of them. Everything will be, put down on this material for you. Okay. And within the material, we've also embedded the videos, right, that are being created for, some of these sessions. Okay. So you can follow up with these videos. If you don't have the material, make sure you're on Discord server, right? If you're on the Discord server, you can follow up with this, and of course, you can easily follow up with most of the things that we're covering here, right? There's so many videos, and we still have more videos coming in. Okay. All right. So back to our code, our code. Yeah. So we have full name. Let's also add that for email address. Save this. Okay. Let's refresh. So we have email address. And I think the other item right here is password. Okay, so password. Let's save. All right, so now we have password. Let's just add some space, just like this. Okay, of course, maybe one more space. Maybe one more space right there. Okay, so now we have full name, email address, password. You have the option to select if you agree with the terms and condition. Ideally, you would also want to make sure you have a link to the terms and conditions so that this can be clickable. We don't have that file right now, but yeah, I mean, you can simply let's just say terms and condition. Okay, so save. All right, so you see this is actually a clickable link. We don't have any hyperlink reference, so I'm just going to keep this as hash just to say we don't have anything yet. Okay. All right, so we have a very simple form, and I also want to add more details to the label. Okay, so the label that we're using right now, one of the best ways to work with labels is to ensure that you have the four attributes. Okay, so when you say label for, you can then identify that, okay, I want this label, right, to actually be for, this specific item. Okay. So you can say, I want this label. You see, we use the ID, right? So you can basically say, I want this label to be for this item. So if you're saying you want this label to be for the item of full name, then you have to include the ID or full name, just like this. Okay. So this name basically describes that, okay, this is basically the name for this input field, right? This is the ID or identifier, right? So I can basically identify this. Maybe while I'm using JavaScript, I can use this as an ID, right, to identify this particular element. Okay, and of course, the labels would also help out here. So if I refresh this page, if I click on this, it automatically focus on the input field, right? I did not click here. I basically clicked here. Okay, so you see, if I click on this here, it doesn't focus on the input field because I did not set the for attribute to say this label is for this item. Okay, but I did that for the full name. So if I click on this, it basically focuses on the input field. So let's go ahead and add the for attribute on the others. So I can say for email, all right. So I can of course include the name of email as well as the ID of email. All right, so let's save. I just press Ctrl S, or I can click on File, click on Save. If I've done that, I can refresh and I can simply click on email. Now you see it actually focused on the input field. Now for password, it doesn't focus because yes, we are yet to add the same attribute, which is the for attribute. Let's do that this time around for password, right? And then I can also include the name, password, as well as the ID of password. All right, let's save. Let's refresh. So now when I click on password, it also focuses on the input field. Okay, so let me take some questions from the chat. Please ask your questions. Um, you mentioned attribute name and ID. Are they the same or just similar? No, they are not necessarily similar. So they are different. The name is basically used to, describe that particular input field, right? What you expect to have. The ID is mostly, for, the label as a use case, but mostly used as an identifier, especially when you're trying to reference that particular, element, while you're using JavaScript. Yes, you can also do some referencing with the name, but the name is primarily for, just adding some sort of description, right, to what that input field is used for. Okay, especially, to help you out. I would say to organize your code as well as I mean, you would always want to use ID for referencing. I mean, you would find a lot of developers using ID as well for referencing and not, the name. So please just note that this is primarily for adding some sort of reference, some sort of description, right? To say, okay, this describes my password item, okay, and the ID is what I can use to identify. Someone is asking why so many divs. Okay, that's because we're not using CSS and we're just trying to break, each item into its respective line. Of course, we can use, the break tag, just like we did here. Okay, but we are trying to use divs instead. All right. Yeah, just to differentiate each item. So each item contains, like the label as well as the input. All right. If you're using styling, you would prefer to go with maybe grids or flex, but we have not gotten there yet, so we'll touch on that in the future. Okay, so do I have any other question here? Let's see. Do we have any other question here? Okay, what software are you using for coding? I think someone answered that already. um Okay, like P for tag, you mean for the divs? Well, I mean that is not, it's not advisable to do that. So use the div if you're trying to, differentiate different sections. I mean, you can use sections, but yeah, div is basically your divider. Div and section will probably do, in terms of yeah, so you basically use these things for grouping, okay? But you want to use divs more when you're trying to separate items or group items. By default, the div has no it has no special meaning, okay? As you can see from the description there, it also says the same thing. No special meaning at all. It represents its children. It can be used with the class, lang, and the title attributes to mark up semantics. Okay, so basically you're just using it to group items. There's nothing inherently special about the div tag. Okay, I hope that answers some of your questions. If you still have more questions, let me see. How about classes? Will it still have will it still have worked same way if you use classes instead of ID? Not exactly. Okay. We're not doing CSS yet, but when you put in a class there, you're basically trying to perform styling. Okay, ID is mostly for identification, right? And of course, even with JavaScript, you can basically identify, common types or common elements that have similar classes. So you can basically select some items based on the class, no doubt, right? But if you're trying to identify, an element, ID is a preferred option. And if you're also writing CSS code, you can even style, based on the ID. Okay. But let's just look at it this way. Using a class is, primarily a thing you would want to do if you're doing CSS, right? Even though you can actually reference, classes from JavaScript, most of the time you'll probably be using it for CSS. Okay. And when you're working with ID, most of the time, right, you'll probably be using it for JavaScript. Now, if you're the developer that actually have your own preference to how you do things, where you choose to use IDs instead of class and all those kind of stuff, um, eventually when you work with other developers, you'll figure out that, people would always go for, a class when they're working on styling, and they would mostly, go for IDs when they're trying to do some JavaScript behaviors. Okay. So just have that at the back of your mind so you don't so you don't get confused when you see other people's work. Okay. So someone is saying, can we use button for the submit? Yes, you can. Um, but yeah, the submit option is the recommended way of doing things, especially when you're within the form tag or the form element. Okay, so we don't have any other question. Hello, ma'am. Your closing tag for the checkbox. Okay, let me see. Did I make a mistake? Yes, probably did. Where is it? Okay, where is the okay, I mean that's how you are you referring to the text? The text there only describes what should be added to the input the checkbox type. If you have any other question, okay, please you can ask. Someone is saying, are you also programming using Python language? I don't think that covers why we're here. Okay, all right, let's continue. Um, let's continue. So I think we've taken most of the questions already, right? So we have, some other types when it comes to the input, the list of input types. All right. There are some other types. Let us take a couple of additional types. So, for example, we can actually try the radio type. Okay, let's try the radio type. All right, so I'm going to also, try to just put this in its own container, right? And I would have the input type. Let's do radio. Okay. Okay. Let's also include the name. We're going to call this maybe gender. All right. And then we have value of male. Okay. And I'm just going to include male right there. Let us refresh this to see what we have. So you see we have gender. Yes, you can, of course, put in label. Remember, you can put in a label. Okay. And you can simply say maybe this label is for gender, just like this. Okay. Um, Yeah. Okay. So you can actually use this as a way to describe maybe a set of items that should work together. Sort of having maybe male female, right? But of course with the same name. So we can also have like female right here and of course female right here. So if I save this, I go back to the browser and I refresh, you see we have male or female. Okay. So if I select one of these items, you see the other one is the selected status actually goes off, right? So right now it's kind of like saying, okay, this is selected, right? When I select this, it goes off from here and it basically appears on this guy, right? On this element. Okay. That's because we're using the same name, right? So it's basically trying to, select an item for, one of the items, one of these elements, right? Okay, so yeah, let's see what else are we going to try out here. Let's try out the select. Maybe I should put in some comments, and I will share this with you after the class. So I'm going to put in some comments right here. I'm going to put in a comment to say this is the texts input text type. Just like that. That's a comment. This is email type. Okay. This is a password type. All right. This is of course the radio type. Okay. And yeah, okay. Right here we have the checkbox. Checkbox. Let's put that together. Okay, we're also going to have a select item. So let's do select. All right, so just like this, you have the select item, and of course, you can put in the name. So we can basically call this maybe, let's see, specialization, right? And within the select item, we can now put in the options. So you basically have options, okay? So options, just like this, right? That is option, not options, okay? And then we can have each option can have its value, right? So we can have maybe software engineer, right? And then you put in software engineer. That is what will be presented in on the front page right here. So you see we have software engineer as one of the types. Yes, you can have multiple options. One, two. Let's see, you have three. So we can have like backend engineer, front end engineer. Here we can have like full stack, maybe full stack. Okay, so full stack, front end, backend. Okay, all right. So let's refresh that. So now when I click on this, you have a drop down that gives you a full stack, backend, and front end engineer, right? So this is basically the select type. Most people would, yeah, I believe you should have seen this somewhere before, right? So basically refer to that as the select type. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask your questions before we proceed to some other types. Okay. If you have any questions, drop your question in the chat. All right, let me check. Let's see the chat. Okay, so someone is saying, what is the function of the type? The type is basically, you put in type to select or to, like write the type of input you're expecting. I mean, that's kind of repeating the word type, but yes, that's what you're doing basically. Okay. Um, I've never used the option tag before. Thanks for showing me what it does. Thank you. I mean, that's why we're here. All right. Okay, let's continue. I think that's the only question I have there. Someone is saying PHP is so lame. It's not readable. That's not why we are here. Anyways, can label be used with the select tag also? All right. So when you say label be used with the select tag, if this is what you are referring to say this label is for specialization, where you can also have the ID specialization, and then you say select your specialization, right? If that's what you mean, then of course, if this is what you mean, so you see when I click on this, it's actually making this, focused, right? So if that's what you mean, yes, if that is what you mean. Um, all right, if we don't have any other question right now, let's proceed. Okay, we still have a couple of items to cover. So someone is saying, what is the shortcut for commenting on VS Code? Yeah, just use Control and slash. Okay, if you're on a Windows, Control and slash. That's the slash key where you have the question mark and the slash. Probably close to the Shift key on the right. Okay, so yes, if you're on a Mac, then you use Command and slash. What's the function of the value attribute in the input element? Okay, so the function of the value attribute, let's check that out. Are you referring to this? Are you referring to the input for radio? Okay, if you are referring to the input, the radio input type, you are basically setting the value that should be, behind this option when it is selected, right? Mostly to be used by, your JavaScript. Can't see the comments. Okay, so mostly to be used by maybe your JavaScript, right, or whatever language you're basically using eventually. I mean, I know Python can be used on the web right now. I mean, for some things, okay. I don't know if I would say for everything, but yeah, mostly JavaScript or PHP. So if you're basically submitting this, and you selected male, the value of male would actually go along with it, okay. If it's female, the value of female would go along with that submission, right? So this is just a regular text, right? This is exactly what would follow. So it can be male, it can be male gender or anything you want to write in there, okay. So yeah, that's basically how that would work. Um, right. And of course, you also have value for, the submit type. You have value for a couple of, you know, sorry, for a couple of input types. Okay. Yeah. So we have, what else are we going to be looking at right now? Let's see. We should look at a couple of other types, right? So of course we have the type for, dates. Okay, so we can basically say we want to select a date. For example, we probably want to select a date. So let's just put a comment first to say was yeah input. Oh, this is not. This is a select. Yeah, select elements. Okay, so we're going to have another div, right? And for this div, we are going to have, let's just put a comment first to say this is for the dates, right? The dates type, okay? So yeah, we can simply say the input, or let's start with the label, okay, for dates, okay? So let's just say select a date, all right? And we have inputs type, so we have dates, just like this. All right, and we can also have name, so this is the date plus ID date. Okay. Okay. So if this is what you have, yeah, let's close this. Let us save. Let's refresh. So now you see we have the select a date option here. So you can basically click on this guy and of course select a specific date, right? Yeah. So you can basically click on this guy and select a specific date. Okay. So we also have the input type. I can see we no longer have spacing here. That's a bit messy. Let's try to add some break tag just to put in some spacing. This is what you do when you don't have CSS just yet. Okay, so let's break, okay, and of course break. Okay, let's save, let's refresh. So yeah, we're basically, I'm sure you guys can see the entirety of my screen. Should I zoom out or zoom in? Let's see. Let me check out let me see what it looks like. Okay, so I think it's actually clear. Yeah, I think that's clear. Okay, so let's go back here and yeah, so that is basically the input type for date. You also have the input type for time, right? So let's put in some time. I'm just going to duplicate this, all right, and I'm going to have time right here. So the type should be time. Let's also this is date, not data, date. Okay, time, just to describe. Okay, so if I refresh this, we expect to see, yeah, we need to change this as well. Select a time, save that, refresh. All right, so now you can basically select a time, from these elements, right, that you can see on my screen. So we can select the time, all right, the hour, and of course the minute, AM or PM. Okay, so you can basically select the time. Well, you also have the input field, for uploading files, right? When you're trying to upload a file, yes, you have an input field to do just that. Okay. So I'm also going to duplicate this. All right. Let's paste this right here, and we can actually call this maybe yeah, the label for the file. So I'll say select the file. All right, so file. See, I'm just doing a bunch of, copy and paste here. Okay, so if I refresh, you see I can actually select the file. It says choose file, right? So when I click on choose file, it's basically, asking me to select the file, right? It's literally just saying, okay, go ahead and select the file. All right, I can select the file from here. Let's just use this file. I click on open. That file is selected right here, as you can see. Okay, yeah, so that is basically the input field for selecting a file. You have the input field for selecting a range. Okay, let us try that. We've actually covered a lot already, but there's still more you can do. So let's say we have the inputs option for range. All right, so I'm just going to call this range. Yeah, range. So basically, this is the type. Okay, so range. Okay, so let's see. Save. All right, and of course refresh. So you see you have that range. Okay, you have that range right here. So yeah, we can of course change this to um, select a range. I mean, that's fine. Ideally, you're not selecting here. You're basically just, I would say, I don't know what's the right term for that. Okay, let's just use select a range. So you're basically trying to select or maybe move this, bar. So this can be like 100%. This can be like 10%. I mean, yeah, this is simply a range type. Okay. Um, all right. So maybe we also have something called a field set, right? If you have heard of field set before, if you have not heard of field set, it's simply a way to group items. So, for example, let's assume we want to group like the range file and yeah, range file, time and date. We can basically put these items in the field set. So we can have a field set just like this. Okay. So you basically wrap these guys inside the field set. Okay. Good. And then you can also put a description of that field set. You put that in the legend, just to describe what you have bounded within that, field set. So I can say this is additional sign up information. Information. Save. Okay, let's save that. Let's refresh. So you see you have these items, bounded in the field set just like this. Okay. Additional sign up information. You have the options for selecting your date, time, file, and range, put together. So you can basically use this as a way to group items, right? I'm sure you've seen things like this on your forms. Um, I mean, obviously, if you have been on the internet, you should have seen something like that at some point. Okay. But if you haven't, at least you know what it does. All right. So yeah, we've discussed, validation, some basic validation. We're not doing anything related to JavaScript for now, right? And I'm sure you've seen, some of these forms right here, some of these form elements right here. We still have, some additional types, but yeah, these are probably the most, popular items you would find yourself using. Eventually, if you find yourself using some other types, you can basically, Google around, check Microsoft. Is it Microsoft? I think it's Mozilla Developers Network, MDN. Yeah, you can find some resources there. I would have actually loved us to, proceed into discussing some tags like, audio, the audio controls, video controls, as well as even diving into, iframes and the others. But we no longer have time. It's already 8:59. We actually started pretty late, unfortunately. But yeah, we'll cover the others, in the next class. And of course, you would get some additional materials, explaining these things, very soon. Okay. So if you have more questions, let me take those questions. Make sure you fill the attendance. So what is the range used for? I actually, yeah, I actually showed that, to set a range. Okay. So, um, okay. So some people are asking, why is it showing attendance 4 and not attendance 5? Just go ahead and fill the attendance. I'm sure it will be resolved, but that, I believe that is what you should, yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. Just go ahead and fill the attendance. It will resolve. That's not an issue. Okay. Go ahead and fill the attendance. Make sure you fill the attendance within the next 20 minutes before it is taken down. Yeah. Make sure you also join the Discord server if you're not on a Discord server. Do have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.